That wasn't the sound of Thanos removing half the population of the universe. That was the sound of a podcast disappearing. Yes, the podcast is disappearing. Or at least the older episodes are, as we upload new episodes to SoundCloud, thanks to us reaching the time limit. You can find now all episodes of the podcast on YouTube, and you can find a YouTube link in the description of all podcasts going forward. Just wanted to let you know, in case for some reason you wanted to listen to the older episode. Don't even know why you're listening to this episode, but hey ho, here we go. Let's go.
Yeah, baby.
What's up, Ned? You're here. 2019 podcast. Final Fantasy TCG, Element Hero Plasma Vice 10. Hoping to get some awesome podcast posts for you guys. Don't forget to subscribe and like us, notification bell, and upvote thing for the podcast. Next time on the podcast, it's our first PPPV. That's Paper Podcast View. On the PPPV, we got some exciting matches for you, including the Druminator, Jeff Lossley, taking on the master of a single language, Eureka. Jeff promises to only pay 2 for his cactuar. We'll also have the many ladies of the podcast competing in a mud wrestling match for your pleasure. Jeff will also be partaking in the match for Eureka's pleasure. Listeners of the podcast, do I have a special promotion for you? We know it's something that everyone on the podcast needs, something they've lacked for a long time. It's something everyone that listens to the podcast also needs. For a limited time only, you can pick up the exclusive podcast endorsed exercise. For only $233 a month, you can go outside and jog, go to the gym, lift weights, maybe go for a swim, whatever you need. Additional costs for your local gym, swimming pool, etc. apply, subject to limited quality. Act now. I'd like to welcome everyone to the first ever UC's a Super Special Cadet spoiler section. Every month that we have a Class 0 Cadet spoiler, I will be doing this exclusive section. Without further ado, let's do our first Cadet spoiler. He's King. He's from Opus 9. He's a 4 CP fire forward 8k. His job is Class 0 Cadet. His title is the City of Final Fantasy in Type 0, and his effect is you can discard one job Class 0 Cadet instead of paying the CP cost to play King from your hand onto the field. He's also got another effect. When King enters the field, choose one forward. It cannot block this turn. Our second 0 Class Cadets, there isn't one. There isn't another one, Kakayama. Come on. I want at least 3 more. 3 more for next month. Now we move on to the spoilers of the month. First spoiler is going to be read by Midgar-senpai.
I'm not reading it. Fuck Nael. Nael? 6. Cost. Forward. Opus 9. Job. General. When Nael enters the field, reveal the top 3 cards of your deck. Add up to 2 forward among them to your hand and put the rest of the cards into the break zone. Remove 1 backup from the game until the end of the turn. Nael gains 2,000 power and haste. Remove 2 backup from the game. Choose 1 forward. Deal it 8,000 damage.
The next spoiler is the maze plot. There's a lot of it. Oh boy. And next, Zelon. Wait, no, young boy shouldn't be reading this card. 10, we'll have you read it instead.
Meia, Opus 99 Fleet, 3 CP, lightning forward, 7,000 power. She's a witch. Title is Mobius. At the beginning of your attack phase, select one of the 3 following actions. If you've received 5 points of damage or more, select up to 2 of the following actions. They start, choose 1 forward until the end of turn. It gains 1,000 power and first strike. Choose 1 forward and dull it. Choose 1 category Mobius forward. Other than Meia, it gains haste until the end of turn.
Zelon.
Alright, so it's Heretical Knight Garland. It's 5 CP Earth forward at 8k. It is a knight. It's another Mobius character. The ability reads, if a forward opponent controlled was put from the field into the break zone this turn, the cost required to play Heretical Knight Garland onto the field is reduced by 3. And then his ability that you can activate is 2 Earth and 4 generic. Until end of turn, he gains, when Heretical Knight Garland attacks, deals 6,000 damage to all forwards opponent controls.
Eureka.
With this, it's going to be in every single box you buy, guaranteed. It's a 4 CP Ice Forward, 7k. With EX Burst, when Quistis enters the field, reveal the top 5 cards of your deck out of category 8, and then put the rest on the bottom. And the Job C candidate forwards you control gain plus 1,000 power. The S ability is level ? Death. S, 1 ice, and dull. Reveal the top card of your deck. Break all forwards opponent controls with the same cost as the revealed card. And then you actually get to add the revealed card to your hand as well. Should we talk about yes, Matt?
I don't like it much.
I also don't like it very much.
I like what it can potentially do with stuff like Yuri, where you could potentially go to drawing like 6 a turn, like really stupid endgame setup plays. I really like it for.
I don't know. I think if you got Yuri and 5 backups, you're winning.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, you don't need to play this on top of the Yuri. Like, you just.
Oh, I know you
use your
don't
Yuri.
need to, but you
Like-
can.
Yeah.
So it's
I
a
mean,
win more card.
If you got Yuri and 5 backups, don't you want to play Bart's at 5 cost instead of Yasmet at 9? Like, it's kind of the same card a little bit. I don't know.
See, the thing is, if Yuri and Yasmat live the whole turn, you get to do it.
If Yuri and Yasmet live, the game is fucking done. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's-
you
Yeah.
won, basically.
I could see people cutting A bots for one of it, maybe. Just as
I want
like
to build
an
ice wind
out.
around it.
I think
I mean,
that
yeah, if you really
EX
want the Renoa, but you got your boy Nidhogg, like, right?
I'm going to run both. I mean, I have 0 filter and no dignity when it comes to deck building. So
Your
the
boy
more nine costs, the
fucking
better.
greedy.
I love it, man. I love it.
Hey, this is a really good greedy card because it's got the really good letters on it.
EX
Yeah, like,
Activate All is powerful. Like,
The
that's
X Break 5 is
obviously...
pretty good as well.
Yeah, like there's stuff going on here. My concern is that, like, you know, Kageyama goes on stream and he's like, yeah, Opus 9 is really gonna push the bar on the power level. And then, like, 9-cost cards are like unplayable. You know what I'm saying? Like, 9-cost cards, you don't even get to 5 backups. That's what I'm worried about. You know, it's like a different. The game changes fundamentally. You know, like aggressive strategies are more viable, and then like suddenly Yasmat is going to activate like a forward and 2 backups most of the time when you hit it on EX first. It depends on how quickly you can hit the damage, right? So.
It's pretty polarizing, but I see it. I don't know. I can respect the fact that it might seem like a bit of a get out of jail for $50 card. I wouldn't say free because it's a fucking 9 cost.
Yeah.
But
Less horrible Minerva is the way I look at it, but I like it a
Yeah.
lot more than Minerva, just because the modal stuff makes it pretty relevant in some cases, especially if it sticks around. Like it's like
Yeah.
Barrett from
Well,
this
alright.
set where Barrett sits around and win.
Having
Yeah.
one ETB is good for sure. Like you get one for sure.
the biggest way to make it a little more CP neutral is definitely the activate all characters.
For
But
sure.
you know, removing a monster could potentially be just helpful, and it kind of always will be moving forward. I feel.
Yeah, you
Well,
get
yeah,
your Restless Death
definitely.
Like,
gaze.
that's-
Yeah.
It's
There's-
the part that I feel is the most like techie get out of whatever you're like in piece of it, because a forward of 5 or more, all right, there's a few good ones, but people are running less of those now.
And we're cutting Diablos because of how few 5 costs are running around the field right now.
Yeah, and like in a color that already does have Diablos and Barts and all that, I mean, you can kind of consolidate it into one card, but it's a very big card.
My
Yeah.
big question here is like, if you're in Wind Water or Mono Wind, like, what are you cutting to make room for this? Like, because we're not cutting Fina, we're not cutting.
In mono, I don't think you're cutting anything.
Yeah.
I don't think this goes in mono.
Right.
I think Icewind is probably the home for it because you can use like Norsh to build backups pretty quick, and then you've got that new class 9 move and Renoa to abuse. I think that's the only deck I can see it fitting in right now.
All right, so now I want to talk about my favorite gimmick, which is Icewind Ramp. You play Flans, you play Sit 2, and you activate all your characters, and you get lots of resources. And then you deck it out against real decks, but it's fun.
Yeah, that's what I was like. And then you deck out against Wind Water and Earthwind. I think if you can get like 2 activations off this card and it does something with those activations, it's a powerful card. And then if you can't, it was a 9 cost for it that you can do shit with.
On the idea of Wind, I guess, Class 9th Moogle is genuinely interesting.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's a good card for those who don't know what it is. It's an ice backup. Type 0, Job Moogle. If Class 9th Moogle is on the field, Class 9th Moogle can produce Wind CP. That's a common for Opus 9.
Yeah, I mean, call me boring, but it's probably the card I'm most excited for, and the idea of possibly more.
I think everybody is super excited for this, and super excited that there's the prospect of a cycle of dual backups, so to speak.
I would be surprised to see Jeff give this a 5 in his article.
Oh, yeah, it'd be great in limited, right?
It sounds great and limited to me. I mean, like, obviously, if you don't have win cards, that might change things.
I wouldn't be surprised if this was the new gimmick for this set, so we might see more.
I really hope so. Because these Moogles didn't do the same things that they're doing at all in chapters. So all of their abilities are open, basically. So we could see a whole cycle of these kinds of Moogles. But yeah, if this ends up being a cycle rather than a one-off card, I think that'll drastically improve the playability of 3-color. Let's talk about the Mind... Do we want to call it the Belias cycle or the Mind Flayer cycle? Belias came first.
No. It's Belias number 2, Electric Boogaloo.
I don't know if cantrip.deck is a thing, but these are obviously pretty good cards. We have Belias, which is the 1-cost EX Burst, not the Opus 2 card, Opus 9 card. Belias 1-cost EX Burst from Mobius, a summon that has choose 1 forward until the end of the turn. It gets plus 1,000 power on first strike. Draw card. If you receive 4 more points of damage, it also gains haste. So it's Belias the Gigas without the haste. Unless you have 4, then it's just Belias the Gigas for 1 less. And then we have Mind Flayer and Ice, which is a 2 CP summon EX. Choose a forward opponent controls, dull it, draw 1 card. And then in Water, revealed today, we have Cuculain the Impure at 1 EX. Choose a forward, it loses all abilities until the end of the turn, draw a card. So it looks like we're not sure if all of the elements will be getting one of these or if these are the only 3, but it kind of looks like a cycle where all the elements kind of get 1, the way that summon cycles tend to work. And or maybe all the elements besides 1, I guess. And they all cantrip, have EX, and do a thing.
Yeah, so face value, they're all pretty reasonable effects, right? Drawing a card on EX is fantastic. Cantrips are great when you're floating TP, but they might not be that good the more that I think about it, because we're kind of right smack bang in the middle of the Riku meta. Last thing you want to be doing is sifting, with not a lot of value. I'm hopeful that we're going to see more aggressive lists.
Yeah, I think the more aggressive the meta is, the better almost all of these are. Cuculain is probably the one counterpoint to that, but even then, losing abilities isn't always bad against aggressive forwards. I tend to think about Yashola as the penultimate forward that's the target for this, but like anything that can't be targeted or whatever, evasive cards and win that like can't be blocked by cost X or higher or whatever, they just...
Well, it's great against random shit you'll just see in Swiss occasionally as well, like random Ardens that you hadn't encountered. Gives you answers to stuff that you otherwise wouldn't think about. And Veritas, of course, as well. This really helps against Veritas's exit effect.
Like, as well as like how we already know Water to play, sort of the Cag Nicole type of stuff. Y'shtola obviously is a very big problem for that kind of thing, and I think Cuculain just fits that spot better than Halicarnassus does. It's way cheaper, like it's essentially 4 CP cheaper, right? And on top of that, it's an EX burst and it can cycle when it's not important. So I think that's pretty positive for the card.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think in the mono water stuff, this is just a straight upgrade to Halicarnassus. Like for the Fusoya deck and stuff like that, straight upgrade. I'm not so sure about wind water because you tend to not be playing Halicarnassus off of any backup besides Unit 2. And if this is your water summon of choice and a deck that plays Unit 2, you're not deriving absolutely any value from it.
I don't really like the card too much, I'd have to say. I feel like it's just a really pigeonholed ability. Outside of draw a card, let's be real here. EX Burst, draw 1 card. Always really nice.
For sure.
Yeah. Like that already does make it playable and a decent tech choice. I don't think it's a terrible card, but I don't think I would like to see it in a lot of lists running Water, just because you need other cards to really push it forward. And if you're waiting on that, you're kind of doing nothing. And if you do have that, I don't know what I'm kind of trying to say here. I guess it just doesn't impress me with what it does because it's not self-sufficient like Mind Flayer and Belias to a point.
I think that this card I think we're approaching the point where this card is just good enough by itself. This card it gets better as other cards get better. Does that make sense? Like, for example, Y'shtola is the best example of this, I think. But just in general, like, other cards such as Yuri or, I don't know, Cypher, fucking Cecil, like absolutely anything. Not the Legend Cecil I have, but the Cecil that was revealed. Like everything that does more stuff, which is cards that tend to be slotted into decks, as opposed to like Balls of Stats, which is what Mono Lighting puts out. This kind of tends to negate cards that have the possibility of being played in decks. That makes sense. Like in Limited, I think this card is not very great because things tend to be balls of stats or like in fucking Nael'd or whatever. I don't know. But when you're playing constructed and everything is in the deck for like a very specific reason, because it gets power when this is happening, or it fits in with your game plan, losing abilities becomes much, much more important, I think. Now, I think that the biggest difference between this and Halicarnassus is that Halicarnassus doesn't target and this targets, which is kind of a problem against a lot of things that Halicarnassus is traditionally associated with being good against, like the untargetable YRP combo or whatever. The whole point of playing Halicarnassus is to make them targetable, right? And Cuculain doesn't fix that.
Yeah, I don't think it takes away Halicarnassus' spot. I just think in particular game plans, it's gonna the Cuculain's gonna shine a bit more. That's all. Yeah,
I think that in mono in particular, this is probably better than Halicarnassus' spot. It's just so much lighter, and Mono Water has a very, very straightforward game plan. This hedges a lot of different bets without having to play a 3CP 7k forward that does nothing in a lot of situations.
What do we think about the Mind Flayer?
I think the opposite of this one. I fucking love it. I'm on record as being someone who likes just general dull effects with upside.
Yeah, you like Kate Sith.
Yeah, well, like Kate Sith fell off as the game got more powerful, but I hung on to Kate Sith for a very long time. Yeah, no, I think it's a good card. I think the EX Burst draw a card justification adds up on top of the fact that it can just push for aggro when you need it. I like
defensively as well, which is really big. Like dulling an attacker and drawing a card can really help swing a game back.
Yeah, the dulling a thing will always have some level of impact when it's in your hand. I really like that. I don't think it would ever feel like a dead card in your hand. Maybe not the best card you could have, but I don't think it ever feels dead.
I really hate the ice summons in general. Like when I build ice, I tend to go like 3 Glacier and not much. But I think I probably would actually run this Mind Flayer alongside Glacier. Just because if you're activating Glacier, you're doing Glacier and this in the same turn, you can probably make a pretty big advantage gap, especially if you're killing them forward and discarding.
I compared this card to Shiva, and I'm like, it has one less dull target, but I get to draw a card, and it has EX. So I think it's solid. It's definitely solid. It doesn't have the name Shiva, which is probably the most.
If it was called Shiva, I would be fucking hyped for this card.
Yeah. If it was called Shiva, then the card would be great. I thought about why this one was cost 2, and if you just think about it for a second, if this card was cost 1, it would be nuts. There's so many times when you're floating a mana, especially when you're playing, Flans or whatever, and you want to dull something, and you get to cantrip with this. And Ice would just be too good at floating mana, I think, if this was a 1 cost. I think they thought about that very specifically and made it a 2 cost. I don't know if that means there's going to be other 2 costs, like in Wind, which is also very good at floating mana, or what. But yeah, making it 2 costs was probably the right call, but I don't know how. It seems very detrimental to the card's competitive viability.
I keep drawing comparisons to Lancer Unit that come out in Opus 8.
Yeah.
Like, there's some very distinct differences, to be sure, but I don't know. The Lancer Unit didn't really get there, even like playing Mirror and getting sick value. I don't know if this does. It strikes me as more of a defensive card, but it also suggests that it wants to dull things so you can hit with Genesis. So it's a bit confusing to me. Maybe it's going to be better than it seems, but I'm not crazy about it.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think that this card, in the right circumstances, is probably one of the best cards you could possibly be playing. Like when you're racing, this card is obviously insane. As an EX, when you're taking a lot of damage, as a dull for just the cost of the card itself, because you're recovering 2 of it. It's very good in racing scenarios. Outside of that, it just seems hard to imagine slotting this, which is the biggest.
Giving Ice Straw's nice though.
Yeah, giving Ice Straw is nice for sure.
And EX Burst. There's
for sure.
Not a
Ice
lot of that out of some specific ones.
Ice is very well balanced around the fact that it doesn't have +1 EX Burst, and this is a +1 EX Burst. So there's definitely that to look for. All right, do we want to talk about
Nael? Backgammon Control. Let's go.
All right, let's talk about Backgammon Control. So Renock, and then there's cards on this list that we have text for, but don't have pictures for. What was the fire card?
It's in the chat. It's in the chat.
It's in the chat. Thanks.
Thanks, yo.
Yeah. So we've got Gijuk, the rare from Opus 9, TCP 5k, job Headhunter, category 12. And when he enters the field, if you control 4 more job Headhunters, deal 5,000 damage to all forwards the opponent controls.
Can't say I'm a fan.
I'm not about that.
There's only 4 Headhunters in FF12 anyway, like lore-wise. It's hard enough to do it with like the FF7 deck, which is based around slamming dudes down for really cheap, and there's tons of FF7 characters. So it's quite a restrictive thing to get a kind of diet Fina effect.
If we have a way to search Headhunter backups, and 3 Headhunters are backups.
2 CP in Fire is also just a really nice place to be for generally aggro cards.
They've got to be forward, so Eureka. I've just read the text again.
Yep.
God.
Yeah.
Holy shit, this card sucks.
So you can search them with like Gramis, that's about it.
No. So what this card does is when you're about to lose, you just play it and wipe your own field of 5k and save the game, right?
Yeah, so it's worth mentioning that the 2 CP Earth Headhunter that goes alongside this Renok, or Renok, I don't know how you pronounce that, is 1 Earth, choose 1 job Headhunter. During this turn, the next damage deals to forward becomes double the damage said. You can only use this ability once per turn. So if this is on the field and you play it and then you pay an Earth, you deal 10k to the whole board.
It seems very blue sky.
I will say that if all the Headhunters magically became different colors, you could play Golbez and then grab all 4, except they don't trigger Enter the Field ability, so this doesn't do anything, I'm sorry. Okay, should we move on to a different spoiler then?
Yeah, so I was more interested in the Earth ones. I actually didn't even know about the Fire one. But Renok's really cool. Bargaming can do some kind of cool stuff in mono from stuff we've played around with. But the Earth search a monster thing, right? It's like to Earth Dull, search for a monster.
I was actually just thinking about the Odin. Would that maybe be considered part of the EX Drawer card cycle? Because I think it is, which then kind of carries on from the discussion of them costing 2 or 1.
Yeah, well, they hate having destruction going plus, don't they? So that's why it's 3 cost.
It's 3 CP, I see. So I guess they don't have a set CP cost that they base this around and just kind of did it based on the effects then? Let's break it drunker.
They really don't like efficient summon removal.
Well, I guess the Odin is probably the worst one, right?
For sure. If you don't have a target, you don't get to draw. Like bad luck. And you won't often have a target is the problem. What else was really in this list that was kind of exciting?
Well, we have the Cecil and Golbez.
Fucking Uke, man. Hype.
Uke?
Fire Ice.
Oh,
yeah.
Uke.
Block it, discard a card. Standard unit.
Well, I think you block your opponent discards and then you Medius, right? Like that's the real feels good man way to approach this card, right?
Very scary.
I don't hate the edge, as that feels like it'll maybe just snipe a Y'shtola and a Layla and or Viking in the mirror or something like along those lines.
I like back attack in general. Great mechanic. It's really unfortunate they make back attack so shit compared to a lot of the other like similarly statted stuff. Like I think Tidus
with
could
back
be a
attack,
great
they always seem like take a minus 4k penalty on the card's power just because it's got back attack. It's like
exactly.
Except from Tidus, which had a stupid restriction.
Well, this card has the same fucking restriction where it can only be used as win backups. Now I think the good part about that is that win backups are obviously easier to leave active than water backups.
Yeah, that's definitely.
You're like, yeah, man, I don't have anything. Because that happens a lot in Win, when you bards or whatever, and you got to pass the turn with a bunch of open backups and nothing's happening. And then, surprise, I got Edge. Even if it's not a surprise, they always have to think when you leave backups open that you have Edge. Which I think is what makes Edge way better.
If you hit a Bart's off EX and they've still got a couple of attackers left, they might just have to go, does he have Edge? I'm going to have to end my combat phase right now, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Another interesting thing is it's really good with Yuri. If you're going to be threatening 4k twice, you just develop a 7k for free, right?
For sure.
That's pretty good.
I'm having a look at how relevant the second ability is, and I mean, that's my reaction so far. Looking at everything it could possibly target, I mean, maybe the Cecil?
Yeah, Barb.
You could get a Barb Rishia.
It's Barb, mostly. I don't think that's happening.
Yeah, no, I decided to look into it, and it's not wise decision.
This month on Podcast Talk, we're going to talk about the topic of discussion, disagreement, Facebook moderation in regards to Final Fantasy TCG in the community. So sit back, relax, get tense again, get angry, calm down, and enjoy as we attempt to navigate through the rough seas that is this topic. In a rare change from the usual, I'm going to start talking first. I'm going to give you my thoughts, my opinions, and then I'm going to pass the torch and let everyone else have their turn. So let's begin. This topic is cooled down a little bit because we're always first to discuss it, of course. We get in there right and early. So to begin, I'm just going to quickly explain why we're going to talk about this, and then jump into some of the actual issues and things and my thoughts. This what happened isn't the first controversy in the game, and it's also not the first to have discussion be shut down, which is one of the main things that happened. But I think that this is probably the biggest one so far, in terms of what actually happened, because it involved the NA rep, and then eventually EU rep, and then eventually Kageyama came out with a statement. And additionally, I'm not going to name anybody here, but obviously I'm going to talk about specific people and you might be able to work it out. If anyone else on the podcast wants to name people, that's fine. I won't edit that out, but I'm just going to avoid naming them. So the incident happened at the North American Crystal Cup Water. What happened was a player paid 2 for Black Mage. It's kind of irrelevant what the card does, it's just that he paid 2 for a backup. He then proceeded to play down Fordola without paying anything, and then proceeded to move the Black Mage to the break zone to fulfill Fordola's ability, which is to sack a backup when she enters play. Then she gains 1000 power, haste, first strike, and brave permanently as long as she's on the field. The player then went on to win the game, despite not actually paying for Fordola at the time. I don't think that the fact that the player won the game is super important. However, I do think that it is an important thing to note. I think the fact that they did it in the first place is the main issue here. The fact that they won obviously compounds the issue, but whether they won or lost, they made an illegal move, and that's sort of the point. Table judge was watching over it, which is something that I think people have been wanting for a long time. Unfortunately, the judge did not catch it. This judge is also the NA rep, so the rep for North America as a whole, and obviously the opponent as well missed it. Eventually, footage of this emerged, passed to the officials, and then the EU rep, the NA rep, and Kageyama all saw it, and eventually the community at large saw it, and a discussion topic was raised. That's where the kind of catalyst of this discussion comes from, because people came out and called for action to be done against the player. People wanted the game to stop being so lenient about this stuff. They want the reps to do better. Some people specifically named the NA rep because they were at the table, it's their area. The topic was eventually shut down and deleted by the Facebook moderators, and then sometime later another topic was made, sort of in regards to the fact of why was the original topic deleted, blah blah blah, and then this topic wasn't deleted, it was locked, probably because the last one they got called out for deleting. It should be noted, in this one, the NA rep and the EU rep both said that they were going to step back from posting in that group because this wasn't a quote-unquote official channel, and that if anybody had any problems, they should talk through official channels and not in Facebook groups. Finally, Kageyama himself released a statement on the website. He apologised for the incident and everything around it, and kind of threw the NA rep under the bus. Quickly to touch on the cheating, I think the problem is proving intentional cheating isn't always easy. You can watch what he did and say there's no way he didn't know he was doing that. That doesn't really, unfortunately, mean we can do anything about it. As a judge, it's a bit different between, say, what he did and taking a card from your break zone and putting it in your hand. If you do that on stream, I would say there's no way you weren't intentionally cheating. So the fact that can't be proved, however, isn't really anything, because I think the game in general is far too lenient. Things like this and slow play, etc. I think everyone's seen that slow play is pretty rampant in this game, and there's not really anything done about it. I think judging in general typically seems to be a little lack. This was the first time in a long time we've seen a table judge, especially in North America, especially because before this there were plenty of other incidents where stuff happened and people felt like if there was a table judge they would see it, although I guess this proves this isn't really the case. But we definitely need stricter judging in major events, especially when it comes to Top Cut, and I don't know why the judge didn't see it, but maybe maybe they need to pay more fucking attention to the game. As for the discussion topic stuff, which is what the main crux of this is rather than the actual cheating itself, I think the community in general likes to peddle the rhetoric of the community isn't toxic, to say it's the nicest community ever, everyone's lovely, everyone's the best. And I think that pure kind of mindset is part of the reason that the discussion is sort of being shut down prematurely. It's to preserve the sort of appearance of that. It's not the main reason, but I do think that part of that is also the reason that it's happening. I don't believe that disagreement in the community is toxic. I don't believe that wanting someone to be punished is a personal attack. I think saying you're a cunt and I hope you die is a bit toxic in personal attack, but nobody was really saying that. Wanting a certain player to be punished for cheating isn't really toxic, it's not a personal attack. People disagreeing with each other, even if it's a little heated, isn't really that bad. Like, there's a difference between being a little bit heated and calling, saying that I hope your mother dies. If the moderators do feel like someone is personally attacking someone or being toxic, they can delete the comment and they can message the individual and warn them. That is within the realms of their power, but instead they seem to always want to just shut down the entire discussion. I feel like we have these issues in the game that keep happening, that keep coming up, and they're worth discussing. And even now the reps are saying that if you want to, you shouldn't discuss them. You should go through official channels. And I think that's fine. But at the end of the day, I don't think there's any harm in the actual community discussing this stuff. And I think that if the community actually discusses it and it's a problem, then the reps need to actually notice it. I don't think they need 40,000 people, not that there's that many players in the game, messaging them officially, however the quote-unquote official channels work, which is that they reply every Monday with a ruling. I don't think this needs to happen behind closed doors half the time. I think it's fine for the community to discuss it, and I think that, yes, sometimes the community can be a little bit quick to dislike things, such as draft that was coming into the Crystal Cup. I do think the draft, the way it's done in Final Fantasy is shit. Cross-pod is garbage. But that doesn't mean that there isn't discussion to be had. It doesn't mean that everyone should just message the official channels and can't discuss why they think the draft is bad or good. Can't make Facebook posts about it. Although I guess that one wasn't really shut down. But, in this regard, I think that this is just as relevant a conversation to have when there's something as serious as somebody cheating and winning in Top Cut. So, and in summary, kind of deal with the individuals. Don't shut down the entire discussion. Let it happen. Let the community disagree. Let them discuss. Pro-Liberty. Who wants to start now? Esfer?
Yo basically said pretty much how I feel on it. I think it's a real shame that a lot of positive discussion gets shut down just because we're a nice community, quote unquote. We do have a lot of nice people in the game, but there's a lot of really high level players that had some really, really important feedback. And I mean, people that place very highly at Worlds were talking about how cheating and things shouldn't be judged on intent or lack of intent. If somebody makes a mistake, they should be punished for it, because that way they're going to be more vigilant in the future. And unfortunately, really good posts like that people probably would get on board with just because those people are names in the community, and now just completely gone because the moderators wanted to prove that they're moderators, which seems to happen a lot. Somebody will post something on a group and it just gets randomly locked. I see it more on the NA community more than I do on the other ones, but it seems to happen everywhere. It's really frustrating to watch. That's me.
I think my thoughts towards it, I guess the biggest thing I see to it is that it does kind of send a message that they don't really want to look into private groups and everything to get the feedback when they want people to send it to them directly, or they want it out of the public eye so they don't have to really try and cover it up. People can and will make an outrage out of current events in anything, and Final Fantasy isn't an exception to that. When it comes down to it, it's a card game, it's a hobby, people are passionate about it, they're going to care about it. And again, the reactions that did come from that sort of sent the message, and I know Ten has said this kind of often, is that cheating is okay, because they're always going to assume the best of you. And as a semi-competitive player, I would probably sit myself at, I just don't like that idea that, my opponent across from me could make a pretty big mistake that leads to them getting an advantage, and the assumption is, I guess it's fine because it's happened now. And on top of that, it's a lot of censorship and the sort going down for the sake of preserving that viewpoint that, yes, this community is friendly and nice and all that. And I think that's true to a point, but you can't expect people not to get angry when something happens in a game that they're passionate about.
I'm kind of halfway. I think that players should incur punishments based on the infractions that they have committed, which sounds obvious, but doesn't mean the same thing to everybody, I think. Personally have a lot of judging experience as a head judge, and not at a YCS level for Yu-Gi-Oh, but for regional level, I judged a lot of Attack of the Giant cards and stuff like that at YC Anaheim and stuff like that for Yu-Gi-Oh. Very involved, and I think that my biggest takeaway after all of that experience, maybe 5 or 6 years, was that players should always get an infraction for the thing they did. And what they did, there's kind of 2 dimensions to that. So things that they did are actions that they committed that are irrefutable. So in this case, it would be he irrefutably played for Dola for the CP cost and then activated the ability without paying, or without resolving the condition behind it, removing a backup, as it would be. That is irrefutably a procedural error. Now, whether it was intentional or not is kind of up for debate. So he cheated by making the procedural error. Sure, cheating has a lot of different connotations. The player did not necessarily intentionally cheat. Benefited from it, sure. Whether they intentionally cheated or not is like a totally different investigation. There's a lot of people who I know personally have brought like character witness that they would never do it. It was, streaming nerves and stuff like that. On the other hand, it looks pretty fucking damning when you watch the VOD, right? So
It's very smooth.
yeah, it's very sleight of hand, smooth kind of thing. I asked a lot of other players, like looking at the video, hey, what do you think of this? They're like, this is like standard MTG cheating that happens at like Grand Prix all the time and gets people banned, I don't know, because I have not personally launched an investigation, whether they cheated or not. They made a procedural error. I don't know if they received a procedural error at any other point in the tournament, but the fact that absolutely nothing was done after the fact rubs me the wrong way. I think that there is way too much leniency. Upside down cactars only resulting in a game loss is kind of like the lightest possible end of what could be considered appropriate penalty for the infractions that are being committed. And I think he made a procedural error on stream. It obviously blew up and nothing happened. I kind of think that at the very least, Square Enix needed to issue a statement saying that procedural errors will be tracked over multiple events. Now, I think that's like at the very least what should have happened. They didn't do that, and because of that, whether they're tracking them or not, players think it's okay to cheat now, and they're not wrong. And that's like a really big problem in the long-term competitive integrity of the game, especially across multiple regions, but particularly NA.
I agree. I hope that they track more with the idea that, like, if they are, it would be better if they do track infractions, so then they don't have to give out as harsh warning, like punishments on the first infraction.
Right. Yeah. I think some players, look at this and they're like, oh man, he clearly cheated, he needs to be banned or whatever, right? Maybe he did just fuck up. And I don't think players deserve to be banned for accidentally paying 2 for a forecast backup, for like accidentally playing Star Symbol for 3 when you don't have the semi out or whatever. Like, that shit happens. It honestly just happens because you're nervous or whatever, and doesn't get caught. I do not think you deserve to be banned for a procedural error. On the other hand, when you don't actively inform the public that procedural errors are being tracked and that like these things, they're not escaping you, that kind of creates this notion that it's okay and that you aren't responsible for your actions outside of an isolated environment. And this is something that I was like super strict on when I had judged regionals, because I had judged regionals for Yu-Gi-Oh! For like 3 years, and somebody would get an infraction for being late to a match or whatever, and then I heard accusations that they would be like scouting before the match, and that's cheating, right? And then it happened over and over again across multiple events, and they thought that because like it happened in one event, and then I could punish them more severely the next event. And I think Square needs to make that obvious, otherwise cheating is just going to keep getting worse. Like, Josh G obviously can't show up at the next Worlds and then have like Layla's upside down in his deck, right? Like, that's just not... If they did that and they didn't issue him more than a game loss, it would just be undermining the competitive integrity of all events. And I think it's a little ridiculous that they are either hiding it or they actually just don't care about the cheating. Either way.
I think it's a bit of both. I think that a lot of the times we see them, they don't seem to do the quality of life and the sort of the care for the game I would like to see. I think, you can see that in the rules currently, where it's just like they shit them out on Twitter and then they just retract rules, like the recent Ramu Trey ruling. We'll just change the rules because it contradicts other
Right.
rulings, and it's like, okay, you know, we can't keep a track of rules because it's all on Twitter, and then they just undo rules and they redo rules, and like, you know, if they're doing that, how can they, you know, if they don't have a proper advanced rules, if they don't properly maintain everything, I don't see how I can think that they care enough. I'm sure like they do, but I don't know, on the surface it looks like they don't. At least to me, there's so many things that keep happening that I feel like they don't care sometimes, rather than maybe they do.
No, I definitely think you're right. I think it very clearly bleeds into other, you know, a Square Enix, and like there's a lot of lack of quality control over at HJ. You can see it in like erratas, rules, judging, sure, translations, streams, whatever it is, for sure. They obviously don't seem to care or care enough to spend the money and resources to fix.
Well, actually, it's probably a good time to ask, how are things run in Japan? Because you've played at a few events now, and what's sort of the atmosphere? What are the judges like?
So the judges are just Hobby Japan employees. So like some of the judges are like old players, like Higonan and Novel, like two of my favorite players. They work at HJ now. They're like part of the development team, and so like the judges are just comprised of a bunch of players on the development team. I haven't heard of any misrulings from dev team players. The only misrulings that I've ever heard have come directly from Kageyama, and he usually like launches an apology on Twitter right afterwards, and it's kind of, you know, forgotten about, I guess.
Well, to be fair to that, I believe Kageyama said a few times that he's not necessarily overseeing rulings and things like that directly, and that in a lot of cases he's just going by how he understands it.
Yeah, it's not really his. It sounds kind of weird to say, but it's not really his job. He's the end point for all the jobs, right? He's like Bart's, but yeah, I was waiting for somebody to giggle. All right, thanks, Ten. Yeah, it's not great here either. There's often a lot of confusion. I remember a big part was like when Chocobo party attacks with another Chocobo, like does the power, what happens to like the power buffs? So like 2, 3 CP, Opus 1 haste Chocobos party attack. One of them gets Glacial Volus before the ability is activating. Like, what happens? So, like, there's this whole shitstorm where it's like, it gets +6, and then it gets +3, and like, they were wrong on both of them, and it actually gets +0. There's not, like, a quality control or somebody who understands, like, all of the rules perfectly. There's just, like, that person doesn't exist. If I had to guess, I think the closest would be Novel. He's very much the smartest person on the HJ dev team that I have personally like interacted with, but like he was only there after like Opus 3. I think he wasn't even on the team before then. He's obviously not like the source for mechanical knowledge, but yeah, the judges are just staff members. That's kind of all it is, and I think that really shows why they don't think that like judging was a priority, because they plan on making all of the judge staff for all of the events, the domestic events in Japan, to just be a bunch of staff members. But that's like not an option when you leave Japan. So like I don't think they understand how important a judge staff actually is.
Yeah, I personally have no idea. Look, I don't have a lot to add to the conversation that hasn't already been covered, but you know, I'm new to TCGs. I haven't got the judging experience, but it sent a really clear message when Kageyama come out and said that there essentially weren't going to be repercussions and that they're reviewing how they go through things. So hopefully time improves things. But in the meantime, it's pretty bad, right?
Yeah, like the really damning part about that message was just that like Kageyama came out and said like, oh yeah, and don't attack RB. I was like, holy shit. Like, your community is like raging, and then the first thing you do is just like, oh yeah, and you got to stop harassing Square Enix employees, right? It just felt so like out of touch with reality. Like that should not be your priority here. Like obviously you don't want your employees to get harassed, but like it is RB's fault to like a non-zero extent, right? Like RB fucked up, and I'm not saying that they should have their job taken away from them or whatever, you know, but like RB fucked up, and people are going to be mad about that. And like, these are your consumers. And the first thing that you do is say that like, oh yeah, and if you fuck up with RB, you're part of the problem. You know, like that's not what the priority should have been in that moment when you're talking about cheating and the competitive integrity of the entire game.
I think it's funny as well because he said that, but then also threw them under the bus at the same time. Like he basically said like it was the head judges didn't spot it fault, or the table judge, and that was RB. I mean, I think the thing is, if they're gonna ask people to go to their official channels, they have to have an official channel first. You know, currently I don't know if there's any way on the website to actually contact Hobby Japan Square Enix at all, an email address or anything like that.
I think you can contact Square Enix. I don't think you can contact Hobby Japan directly. I think the only region that Hobby Japan directly is JP, which kind of makes sense, kind of doesn't. It's a bit of a tangent, but HJ really needs to like have a person who speaks English, and they don't. So.
And like, you know, currently the only way to get to EUNA is to either like message them in like the new group that they made, or to message them directly. And if those are official channels, I don't know. It's just
Yeah, it's a little bit bizarre, right? Because I'm pretty sure the supposed official channels, or you know, the things that are being spoken about in private, were being spoken about to the representatives personally on Facebook. Like, there's a massive presence on Facebook, and they're going to voice their concerns. It's pretty ridiculous to try and shut that down and say, "Don't do that."
Anybody got any closing thoughts?
It's okay to cheat.
This shit whack.
I think we can go through both of those, right? Like, both of those are your statements now, I guess.
Hey guys, this effort's coming at you fast and hard. It's all about our favourite thing on the podcast, speed. Yes, whether you're about playing the game, watching a blue hedgehog run, or taking a hard jog, or someone and talking incredibly fast, we know you all love speed. Speed saves life. Speed is the answer. Speed is the future. If you aren't on board, get on board. But limited time only. If you enjoy some speed in your life, get some on the website and find out the details. Just remember to do it quickly before... Oops, it's gone. I did warn you. Alright, let's check in with Jeff Losley. It's weather check time. Jeff, how's the weather in North of America?
In America!
Cool. We're going to move on to Call the Cat now. First caller, hello. How can I help you today?
Can I get a flat pan with garlic bread crust?
Oh, excuse me, guys. Gonna have to. This is my job to keep the podcast running. 2 seconds right now. Yeah. What do you want on the? Oh, what do you want on the pizza?
Yeah. I'll have some ham. Thank you.
All right. That'll be $999, sir.
All right.
All right. We'll get that to you shortly.
By the way, your podcast is shit.
Oh, fuck you. Caller number 2.
Do you like scary podcasts?
No?
Okay then, your podcast is shit.
Let's move on to the end of the podcast. Your host for the podcast was me, Yo Caesar. The co-host was kids at his locals call him Midgar Senpai. It's Midgar Senpai. We had Nado. Hope he doesn't threaten to bomb Japan this episode.
I told Hobby Japan that I would bomb Japan again.
We have Eureka. We have our weather correspondent, Jeff Losley. Guest number 1 is 10 letters. Guest number 2 was Zelon. Guests. Okay, it's time once again for the podcast's iconic signature saying, John Cena.
John Cena!
Bye.
Cheating is okay.
It's okay to cheat.
It's okay to cheat.
10.
Oh.
He's gone, ladies and gentlemen.
Excuse
me. All right, so Nael is
No. Fucking
Right?
no.
Quality. Fucking great.
What set's it coming in?
My spoiler's pretty good.
Oh yeah, Nael. It's yeah.
That is not Nail is not my spoiler. It's not like a free CP Nail you can play.
I'm having a look at our little list of things here, and it says that is definitely your spoiler. So you've just
No, God damn it.
Nail is a good card.
Van Zelen.
Meia?
Nail?
Alright, we're ready to move on then. Alright, we're only 53 minutes into the podcast. That was fast.